Yo guys, what is going on? It is Invin here, and today what I am bringing to you guys is of course a roundup of the New World February update. This is going to be the essential stuff that you need to know. I'm not going to go into every detail because, as we will read in the preamble part here, there is over 100 bug fixes alone in this update. It's a huge thing, but there is some very notable changes that are worth noting and worth keeping in mind when you're going fresh into this update. It does drop tomorrow at the time of recording, so if you're watching this on the day it goes up, we're getting it February 28th. For those of you that are watching afterwards to get a recap, hopefully this update is going well. It's looking amazing from these notes, so if it does launch successfully, we could be on a very good track here in New World. Now, I'm going to jump into it. I'm going to try to keep it as sweet and short as possible, but I am going to cover all of the relevant information. As always, there will be timestamps down below, so if there is any parts that you want to come back to, or any parts that you are specifically interested in, do feel free to skip around down below as well. But of course, those that watch all the way through, that is massively appreciated also. Now, if you haven't already done so, please do go down below and drop a subscribe to the channel. I do upload brand new content every single day, and it would be amazing to have you here as part of the channel community. I'm trying to hit 15,000 subscribers, so if you could help me out with that, it would be massively appreciated. Without further ado, let's jump into this one. So, as you guys can see here, like I said in the preamble, we will be getting February 28th at 5 AM PT or 1 PM UTC will be when the update goes live, or the downtime begins for the update to go live. Like I said there, we have seen as well a lot of bug fixes, a lot of kind of momentum changes, a lot of streamlining to the game, and basically things that are going to make it a whole lot more accessible, let's say, on the quality of life side of things, which I think is going to be amazing. Now, with well over 100 notable fixes to make this update, there's going to be a lot to talk about, but like I said, I'm going to kind of summarize most things for you. Firstly, expeditions here. One of the first bosses in Garden of Genesis, the Tax Odious mini-boss, could be killed and looted twice. That's been fixed. You can no longer do that. Now, what's also notable from these is that they've changed things in the depth and Starstone barrows, which is interesting to see whether future plans may be in the works for those to become mutated with some slight variations to make them the same length and difficulty as the end game ones, or whether that is just a streamline for lower level players. I'm not sure yet, but it seems like they're putting a lot of effort in, so one to keep an eye on there. Now, in terms of the world, what have we seen here? Well, we've seen fixed issues where basically you could build the camps into midair. They've fixed a few general AI issues, which we're going to get onto and talk about more specifically in a moment. But generally, they have streamlined and corrected a lot of the spawns and placements in the POIs, that kind of thing, and also updated some of the loot pools to be more accurate to what they should be for the level of the area. General AI, they have introduced a new player versus AI physics collusion system that will significantly reduce the amount of pushback from colliding with characters. This is notable for two things. Mainly the first thing, bipedal and simple shaped creatures. So generally anything that's stood upright or on two legs, bipedal, two legs. This thing here is going to be such as the Withered, the Ancients, the Guardian, Corrupted Lost Pirates, etc. That is what they've updated to, so you should see, especially one that's most notable there is Brutes for invasions, and of course the Elite Zones. You should be able to get the hitboxes much better on these now, which is fantastic. Future updates will look to improve collision versus quadruped and long creatures, so cats, elk, wolves, alligators, etc. Anything big, four-limbed, that type of thing coming in the future. Now, as well as that, they've also had improved AI targeting evaluation. This is important because it means that the AI should actually hit where you are and you're not going to get randomly attacked, which means it's probably better for most things. Yes, you can't cheese as much as you were trying to before for those players that were doing that, but generally those that were trying to clear this normally as groups in elite zones, in expeditions, whatever else, the AI is actually going to hit where it's intended to hit now, so you should get less random half HP drops or full HP drops for the very squishy players, which is obviously a good thing across the board. Again, they've updated most of the mobs in the game to just kind of be a lot more streamlined, work as intended, and kind of just have a lot more significance in the roles that they're playing. Again, I'm not going to go through each individual thing, but they will be linked below, so if you do want to have a look at those, you can of course do that. Now, Expeditions AIs, there's some interesting things here. You've got increased headshot hit volume for the Blighted Greenskeeper in Genesis. You've also seen that the visual effects will be synced with the damage on the Shaman, so that's with the mist that gives you the darkness effect. Main one here is going to be Lazarus Instrumentality and Chadris. what you've seen with Chadris is increased the length of the stun phase, increased the time before the final laser phase from 75 after the phase starts to 90 seconds after the phase starts. This is going to be crucial because it's going to mean you're going to have longer before you actually get that final laser phase in to get damage down. The reason that is important is because this point here, increased damage by 25% across the board, and rework Chadris' final laser to now deal 15% of health as damage per second, so even your tanks are going to be taking that damage. This is easily out-healable with a full-spec healer, of course, but you are going to need to block and you are going to need to be healed constantly, as opposed to just being able to DPS through it, especially on the later mutation difficulties, so bear that in mind for your timed runs, and also tanks and healers be on your toes. That being said, the point just above that is the increased damage of the base laser during phases 1 and 2 as well, so you're not just going to be able to kind of run around for a little bit, you are going to actually have to do the objectives more or less as soon as they come up to avoid taking too much unnecessary damage. Now, with that as well, they have fixed the issues with him not taking bonus damage from ancient-related perks and coatings and not having the proper strengths and resistances. So that means that if you are using the correct weapons with Ancient Bane, for example, and Ancient Coatings, they are now going to apply additional damage to the boss. So even with his increased damage, it is still going to make sense. You're going to be doing a lot more damage to him now as well, which is great. And this, of course, is paired with an increased size of Chadris' headshot hit volume as well. So we should be able to get a few more crit strikes on him, meaning that we can bring him down a little bit quicker. So overall, a little bit harder to deal with, but also a little bit easier and takes a little bit more damage if you're using the correct equipment, especially in these mutations. Now, speaking specifically about mutators here, you will see that they have reduced the desiccated timer from 60 to 45 seconds. They've normalized curse damage to ensure that curses are always a threat to players of any health pool size. So again, mainly tanks, bear this in mind. Censored damage normalized to 65% of your base health, and desiccated damage normalized to 50% of your base health. So if you do get hit by either of these abilities, you will be needing that heal pretty sharpish, or that pots, or whatever it is that you need to do there. So bear that in mind, especially tanks. That's going to be the biggest change for you guys. Now, in general, we've seen some big updates to combat swiftness, combat fluidity, and dodging, impacting, movement in, all that kind of stuff has been updated massively. Now, this is really important, so I'm just going to read through these first couple of things on blocking and weapon swapping. You can now swap weapons during hit reactions, dodges, traversal, and whilst using consumables except weapon coatings. These will not interrupt those actions, and there is a 1-second swap cooldown in these cases. Now, weapon swap buffers will no longer be cancelled if you are staggered before the weapon swap can occur, so as soon as you come out of that, the weapon swap will then happen. And weapon swaps and attacks can now be queued simultaneously, e.g. if you press swap during an attack's recovery, then immediately press an ability key, the weapon swap will swap at the first swap cancel frame, then immediately perform the desired ability. So in other words, if you swap into the healing staff and trying to get a sacred ground down underneath you, it will actually happen in that order and not you'll end up throwing a grav well or something with the axe. That's happened to me many times playing Paladin, so this is something that I certainly welcome, and I think a lot of players are going to see a huge benefit from this. It's going to be much more fluid combat, it's going to be much more responsive, and it is going to increase the skill gap in PvP because it's going to be based on what inputs you actually give the game and not where it got stuck, which is great. Now, pairing this with the blocking and dodging updates that we've got as well here, which is where they have shortened the recovery time for all of the dodges, transitioning to movement after a dodge now feel more fluid for all players. Basic attack startups for melee and range can now be dodge and block cancelled up to 2 frames before the first active frame. For melee attacks, the first active frame is the first frame the weapon can deal damage, and for ranged attacks, this is the first frame that the projectile is spawned. When performing light attacks with a melee weapon, block and dodge inputs will now take priority over the next light attack in the chain. This change is aimed at preventing accidental attack cues that leave the player vulnerable when they intended to defend. So essentially, if you actually want to block or you want to dodge, instead of going for that second hit, you will now be able to cancel out the second hit chain if you get it timed in the right place. Again, really increasing that skill gap for both range and for melee players playing against and with the melee's functions. And I actually think this is a massive, massive change that is going to make the most impact in 50v50, but also, you know, in PvE, this is going to be really, really useful, and is going to mean that we are in a much better position to be able to put skill to the test rather than just waiting on the system actually catching up. So again, it's still not going to be 100% foolproof, and we need to see how it works in live, but I am very excited for that change, and I think those 3 things there are probably the pinnacle of this update with what is really, really just ultra useful to all players. Now also jumping, they've changed there. Just if you jump off a lower height, you're no longer going to get the decrease to momentum. Attributes has had change to the 300 focus attribute, and it will now trigger the regeneration when you drop to 15 mana or less rather than to 0, which is great. Equip loads have now been normalized so that you don't get a strafe movement speed difference based on the equip load, and there's been some bug fixes again with that you can read through should you want to. Now, with the weapon updates here specifically, we've got some parts here, and if I scroll all the way down real quick for you guys, you'll see towards the bottom of this article, that is how long the article is. It's absolutely huge. You will see that there is some weapon changes here, Void Gauntlet, Rapier, and of course down here the Great Axe as well. These are in the PTR notes section, so this is things that have been added after the initial notes. What I've done is compiled my own set of notes that compiles both of these lists of weapons so that we can actually scroll through these and look at the right time. So I'm going to go back up to the weapons, and if I'm saying things that are not directly related on your screen to the list that you're seeing, it's from the bit at the bottom, so you can go ahead and confirm that for yourselves should you wish to, but I've saved you the job there of searching through both sections of it. So essentially, with the bow, we've seen a balance on the bow by quite a lot. Rain of Arrows no longer has backstabs, but the bleed effect can be extended through perks and passives, and you can no longer attack underwater with the bow. The Fire Staff, we've seen Fireball be much easier to hit now and can also critical hit, which with the correct passives we know can apply a burn. Pillar of Fire has had improved consistency, and Flamethrower is now been updated to have 2 times the movement speed it had previously, so Flamethrower is going to be very quick now indeed, which is going to be very interesting, especially for PvE. It's actually pretty good. The Great Axe now more reliably pulls foes to the center of the gravity well. Players that enter the center of the vortex in a gravity well will be rooted for 1 second, and they have increased the slow from 55% to 60%. Ice Gauntlet, you have seen Ice Storm damage stacking fully fixed, so if they've got different attributes on the Ice Storm, that no longer now applies different stacks of damage, and it no longer gives you that 80% damage buff when they come out of it. Also with this, you can no longer dodge or jump through the Ice Shower without being rooted, so the Ice Shower is going to be very pivotal for CC, particularly in wars. Along with this, Ice Pylon has had the radius increased to 3 meters from 1 meter, which means that this may well be viable, especially in PvE, but again, we'll have to do some testing with that one. Light Staff, we've simply seen a change to Beacon, specifically the Speed of Light upgrade will now apply a haste to all targets within the AoE and not just those that are receiving the heals. Musket, we've seen some pretty big changes here, changed a fair bit across the board. No more bugs for infinite abilities, rework of stopping power to fire a special bullet instead of empowering the next shot, which means that you can't get stuck stacking these as well. Loading shots such as Powder Burn or Power Shot can be overridden by the most recently used one. They do not stack, and it will just replace when you use the next ability if you haven't used the previous shot. Can now use consumables with the musket when you are reloading, and it will simply cancel the reload, but it does mean that you're not stuck in that animation, which I think overall is going to be a positive for most musket users. Rapier, we've seen updates to Flurry here that can be cancelled by a dodge or another ability. Riposte cooldown has been increased by a third to 18 seconds. Evade's cooldown has been doubled to 12 seconds, and Flesh has had a cooldown increase from 17 to 20 seconds. So you will want some cooldown reduction perks on the Rapier now, or on the gear set that you use with it, because it has become a lot slower than it previously was. The Spear, we've simply seen some streamlined and updated abilities so that they are more balanced. With the Sword and Shield, here we have seen Shield Rush. We've had a smaller range but larger charge distance, so to compensate for the smaller range you'll have, you actually go further with the ability. Leaping Strike has had better honing and targeting capabilities built in as well, to mean that the tanks can be a little bit more mobile with their abilities. Void Gauntlet has seen Petrifying Stream cooldown from 15 seconds up to 25. Orb of Decay base damage reduction from 100% to 90%, but it does still heal and debuff. That being said, the detonating orb part of this has had damage reduction down to 70% from 100% as well. Warhammer, we have seen Hardened Steel has reduced damage reduction that used to be 20% is now 12%, but is active when any grit is active and not just heavy attacks. So anyone with 300 plus strength will feel this a lot, and it falls more in line with the trenchant perks that we've seen added to the game recently. That actually does make it more balanced, but of course, again, if you are going to be using that 300 strength, it's almost a no-brainer to take that hardened steel perk now, as it is going to apply to all grit and not just grit from heavy attacks. Now, looking into the perks here, there's some key ones to point out. Again, a lot of these have been changed in small ways, some more impactful than the others. Chain perks will no longer go through objects, which is really good for PvE side of things. You're not going to accidentally aggro random mobs, which is great. The most important thing here, I would say, is the aversion. Right here, it says that they have fixed an issue where elemental and physical aversion perks were not stacking properly. Whether this means too much or too little, I'm not entirely sure, but from what people in the community have been saying, it was too little before. So now we should see this upped to the correct amount, and that is going to mean that if you have got armor sets with physical or elemental aversion on, particularly with those mutated sets, these could be really good going forward. Wars and invasions. This one, we've seen Void Destroyer could survive after both its eyes were destroyed. Invasions, that's the big dude skull with the laser eyes. He's now going to go down after both the eyes are down. For any of you active war players, they have fixed an issue with the cleansing elixir that was removing but not properly preventing the reapplication of debuffs during its duration. This is now going to work as intended and means that you will get a few seconds of immunity from debuffs when you apply this, especially if you've got a big stack already on you. This can be very powerful when defending or attacking a point, so do bear that in mind. Those are shot calling for wars, make sure you read up on the description of this before you go into your next wars, because this is going to be something pivotal, especially for your heavy guys that are going to be pushing the points. And players can now access the scoreboard while waiting to respawn. Really great QOL change there, just something to look at while you're waiting, which is great. Outpost Rush is a massive part of this update. I know we've covered a lot of things already, but I do want to go into a little bit of detail with this because it is really important. They fixed a lot of bugs. We're going to kind of skim over that in favour of looking more specifically at the reworking of the scoring system and rewards that they've done. So the most pivotal parts here are that dealing damage now increases the player's score, and that you get a reduced amount of points granted from killing players and killing AI. Now, with this, what you will see is the AI has had some changes, but most notably, you're going to see damage from siege weapons is going to be hugely beneficial versus brutes, ghosts, and summoned bears. So do bear in mind that that is going to be worth using if you are in that game mode, which does mean PvE is going to play a bigger role in it, but it's not going to give you as many points. But obviously to build those up and then take down the brutes is going to be beneficial. You're going to see overall as well, siege damage has been increased, so you probably will see a lot more players starting to hop on those siege points. Also, with this, some big changes that you're going to see is, of course, the rewards that have been granted or will be granted from the Outpost Rush. Namely, the Umbral Shards on a completion of a match have been implemented into the game. So you will receive 100 shards on the winning team and 50 on the losing team. Now, obviously, with that, you still need to meet the minimum score threshold to be eligible for the rewards. As you do with anything else in Outpost Rush, you don't just get it by partaking. You actually need to do some score. But now with the damage dealing increasing that score, that should be much easier for most players. Outpost Rush now rewards faction tokens on completion of a match. Players must meet the minimum score again. These are going to be really useful because you're now able to buy 2 mutated orbs per week from the faction vendor, upon some other things as well, like your regular orbs, your chisels for crafting the mutated orbs and regular orbs, all sorts of good stuff. I think that the faction shops are going to be upgraded and implemented further in the future, so this is going to be really good. Keep trying to get up your tokens and using them where you can. It's going to be very useful. Outpost Rush caches now reward 2 pieces of Outpost Rush specific armor and an Outpost Rush specific weapon. Now there is an additional 15% chance for a 4th item, which will be a piece of Outpost Rush jewelry. Now there's also a 2.5% chance that the rolled Outpost Rush item is a named item, the same chance that already exists today, but they've outlined that that is 2.5% chance. They've also significantly increased the likelihood that the rewards from the Outpost Rush cache will increase the player's expertise. This is really huge for PvP players specifically that don't want to be doing, you know, expeditions, elite zones, or corrupted portals, anything of the like there, because you will now basically be able to get all the way up to 600 solely off Outpost Rush, and then push even into 625 territory with the Umbral rewards. Yes, it is going to take a while, because 100 or 50 Umbral shards, depending on whether you win or lose, you're going to need 9.7k, I think it is, to get one item to 625, so it's going to take a while. But if you really don't want to play PvE at all, at least it gives you some avenue where you can get easily up to 610, 615, and then start to grind up there if you do want to make that final push as well. even if you don't, or you're someone that just wants to play as little PvE as possible, you're going to be able to really focus in on getting most of your gear up to that 615 mark from Outpost Rush fairly swiftly within a few days worth of games, and then you can start to push some of the higher levels of mutation more easily. As well as this, you're going to be well into the war team for most companies. So again, really great for PvP players all round. And I think this update is really going to help there. Outpost Rush gear now rolls specifically off a fixed list of perks that are more ideal for PvP combat. So this means that traits like Beast Ward won't be found on the Outpost Rush gear. Again, making this even more desirable. And also they have removed Beast Ward from Illusionary Enigma and replaced it with Keen. So again, that's going to be an even better piece of gear now. Players can now access the scoreboard in Outpost Rush whilst waiting for a respawn as well, so bear that in mind, huge change there too. Now they've also fixed up the quests for a lot of areas. They've fixed up progression leveling, something I talked about in yesterday's video, where each of the crafting skills is now going to be 10% less XP required to level up, which is great for trade skill aptitude and pushing for level 200. You're going to see rewards have been updated for a lot of the quests and different things that you'll get. Main one here for most players is increase the likelihood that caches from major corrupted breaches will grant an expertise increase. So if you are someone that is trying to get your amethyst gypsum daily, or you like doing the corrupted breaches, you are going to get a better chance at getting an expertise increase from major corruption breaches. You'll see crafting, basically the recipes and schematics that you can get are actually more according to the colour of the weapon you'll craft. So if it's going to be an epic craft, it will be an epic schematic rather than a legendary, so it just makes it more easy visually to see whether you've got something really good or just decent, or something you already have, etc. Now, notable bug fixes here. These are just a few more streamlined effects. Again, I'm going to skip over those in favour of some of the other information in this, but feel free to go ahead and click the link in the description to go and read through these if you would like to do so. Now, main thing here from UI, UX and social, they've created a trade channel and made this a separate thing so people can actually go in there. They've also added the ability to view players' average gear score, their weapon mastery for the 2 equipped weapons, and attribute allocations on the warboard. This is probably single-handedly the best thing in this update, if not the best thing they've added so far in terms of quality of life, and it's literally just crammed in the middle of a UX, UI and social section. This is absolutely huge. I know many players watching this, even if you're not someone that does many wars, you'll understand and appreciate how useful this is going to be when companies, even your own company, are organising wars. And this is going to be really important going forward. This is something players have been asking for ages, so I wanted to take a moment to point that out specifically because that is really important. Now, as well as this, players can now see both friendly and enemy progress towards the brute at the corrupted portal in Outpost Rush, so you know when to counter it. And the crafting screen should no longer select the first recipe if you quickly select another recipe whilst it's opening. Just some glitches there where players were crafting the incorrect thing should be fixed up. So overall, quite a good little section here that's just been crammed in at the end. Again, a big whole list of notable fixes here that I'm not going to fully read through right now, but there is some really cool things in there. Nothing crucial to gameplay specifically, but if you are someone that likes to know every nuance of the game, I would recommend reading them, as there is some interesting things. Like I mentioned before, the PTR notes are down the bottom here, and there is a couple of things that I want to touch on before ending today's video. Namely, that Yellow Topaz has no longer got a minimum drop time. Black Gypsum minimum drop time has been reduced from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, and Purple minimum drop time has been reduced from 2 minutes to 30 seconds. They've also added a Gypsum Orb to the faction vendor, which can be bought once per day for 7,000 faction tokens. Again, meaning that those ones that you're getting from Outpost Rush is going to be much more beneficial, as it's going to give you yet another avenue to get these Gypsum Orbs and then turn that either into Umbral Shards or indeed get your expertise up to 600 if you need to do so. Aptitude leveling smelter gear is now accessible from tier 3 aptitude boxes. Again, I mentioned this in yesterday's video on preparing for this update, but this is a crucial thing. It's the only way to get smelting gear, and it is going to either sell for a lot if you're not someone that cares too much about it, or obviously it's going to be super beneficial. It's going to give you the potential chance at extra Asmodeum daily rolls if you get 11, 12, 13 or even 14 rolls from 110 max daily. It's going to be huge because this sells for a lot. It's used in most crafting, so these are going to be very sought after once this update goes live. So great opportunity to make some money or indeed get some extra crafts on the go for yourself. Again, general fixes, open world fixes. Mainly, the tax is going to be the biggest thing here. This is something I really need to touch on, which is that the maximum band for taxing has gone from 10% down to 1%, so 1 is your maximum percentage tax now, and the lowest band has gone from 5% to 0.1. But please note here that the controlling company receives 5 times the generated coin from regional housing taxes. So, for example, if you have it at 1%, which is the new max, you're going to get 5% as the company, but the players only pay that 1% tax, which makes this a whole lot of a better system. Much more in line with what we saw with the reduction before, just obviously on a smaller scale for be a long-term implementation. But I really like this, and I think that most players are going to be very on board with this decision. Seems really, really good. Now, another huge thing for those of you that didn't see yesterday's video, Umbral casts are now going to give you between 100 and 400 Umbral shards, up from 3 to 200, and also increase the Umbral gained from crafting from 1 to 85 to 25 to 100. So again, if you've got gypsum casts or you're going to craft higher tier items, hopefully gear score 600 and above, these are going to give you much more Umbral shards now, which again, although it's not an excessive amount, if you have got an item that's 625, you're going to be getting 400 Umbral shards every time you open a cast for the item, which is actually really, really good. Now, another thing to touch on here, which I mentioned before, you are able to buy 2 mutated orbs per week. These are every 3 days now, rather than every 7, so do bear that in mind and make sure that you're maxing out on those, even if you're not running them right now, so that you've got a stockpile when you do want to run them, because they are going to be the best and the easiest, most accessible way to get your Umbral shards. And of course, the main bulk thing from the PTR notes here is, of course, the reduction, huge reduction that is, to the fast travel costs for Azoth, and of course, the inns are now 30 minutes rather than 1 hour cooldowns. Towns and shrines have a base cost of 20. There is no longer cost adjustments for Azoth travel for distance or weight. So bear in mind, Azoth is going to be much more used for crafting now rather than it is for traveling, but you do still need a little bit just to be able to jump around. So that is a huge change there. So that is going to pretty much cover everything here, all of the essential things that you need to know. This has actually ended up being quite a long video because there's a lot of important things with this update. It's a huge update in terms of quality of life to the game, streamlining to the game, balancing, and coordination updates. So I did want to bring you guys all of the essential information that I think is most notable. There is a lot of other good stuff like I've been mentioning throughout the video, and like I have said multiple times, I will leave this linked in the description, this article. So if you do want to go ahead and check it out for yourself, read through all of the patch notes, then of course you can go ahead and do that. But hopefully this video has helped you guys to understand and digest these notes, because there is a lot here, a lot to understand. So hopefully this has been helpful. If it has, please do be sure to leave a like and subscribe on today's videos. It really does help to support me and my content here on the channel. And other than that, guys, I would like to thank you for watching, and I will catch you very shortly in a brand new upload. Take care, guys, and peace.